Kia ora koutou katoa. Oh, there you are, up there. Kia ora. Ka mihi nui ki a koutou. We're going to answer all your questions. We had lots of questions through in the email, so that's the whole point of this. Just want to thank you all for joining in. For those that don't know who I am, my name's Nathan Wallis. I'm the resident parenting expert for NIB. We're working together, so we're going to do a few projects like this. It's good for me because it means someone else had to set it all up and promote it. But let's just get into what we're here for. I'm going to start with the karakia though. When we do live performances, normally we have a little karakia at the start. So this is one of my favourite karakia. It's about children reaching their full potential. For those that can't kōrero Māori, all it's saying is may every child sort of access all the love that they need to reach all their potential to grow tall like a tree in the forest of Tāne. Koia nei, tuku tumanako, kia tupu teitei ahau me he tamaiti o tānei nui. Kia rungo ai, kia kiti au, i te aroha o te ao. Kia ora. Okay, right, I'm going to get my pad. Got your questions here. And yeah, introduction-wise, but I said my name was Nathan Wallis. For those that don't know who I am, I do lots of parenting stuff in New Zealand and Australia and China, but I come from down south. You would have worked that out because I pronounced my R's correctly. Don't want to do a great big long intro because I want to answer your questions. So I'm sort of known for doing brain development stuff. So I started out as a primary school teacher and then I retrained as a child therapist. I spent lots of years working with kids around trauma. That got me interested in brain development literature. And then I ended out teaching brain development literature and brain development at the university and for another group. So yeah, there's the short version of my career. Let's launch into these. You can check out all the other stuff and get a longer introduction on my webpage or check me out through NIB. Okay, the questions that you've got. Number one, Jody said, I'm a social worker working from home and we're on the essential worker list. I'm also a single mum to a 6-year-old without family support in our local area. What suggestions for you, what do you have for making this easier on us both? Well, that's a big ask, being at home with a 6-year-old. The first thing I think of is because your child's 6, I wouldn't be worried too much about academic output. Sort of under the age of 7, the child is mainly in their limbic system, their emotional brain. You can sort of think that, and you can divide the brain in lots of different ways, but I often divide it into 4 different brains, going from bottom to top. Brain number 1 is survival, brain number 2 is movement, brain number 3 emotion, and then brain number 4 is the thinking and learning, reading and writing, schoolwork that we think of. You don't really move into that brain number 4 to center stage until you're sort of between 7 and 8. So because your child's 6, they're really in brain number 3, the limbic emotional brain. What that means in plain language, Jody, is that your child just needs to learn to enjoy learning and to feel confident as a learner and to have an identity as someone who thinks that they're a good learner. So the way a teacher does that is to make sure that the child experiences about 80% success. They call it staying in your zone of proximal development, but that's just teacher speak for the kid has to be challenged, can't be too easy. But if it's too hard and they sort of experience more than 80% failure, then it becomes disengaging for them. Yeah. So what I'd say with yours straight away is you don't have to worry too much on the academics. Don't push the reading and the maths. Focus more on having fun. The other bit of advice I'd give you is to make sure that you've got clear times when you are with your child and clear times when you're doing your work. If you can sort of let them know that, okay, I'm going to be doing my work, but then from 2 to 4, I'm going to be available. Me and you will get tea ready or, whatever it is you're going to do, or we'll play. If the child has predictable times throughout the day, that's good for them. And it's good for you because you're not saying, no, I'm busy all the time. Then you're able to say, yep, okay, we can do that at 2 o'clock. It's also way better for your mental health because it's easier for you to have some sort of routine to that. If you feel like your child is tugging on your apron strings all day and constantly wanting more attention, you can just feel like their emotional cup's never full and you're not actually getting the work done that you need to do as well. So, yeah, that'd be my advice. Have clear times for each. This is work time. This is child and play time. And for those times, because they're 6, that's easy for me to say, just go off and play by yourself. Obviously, when they're 6, you're going to have to do some things to set them up, with activities that they're going to like, that they are able to self-manage by themselves. Open-ended things like Play-Doh, paints, stories, imagination, yeah. I wish there was an easy answer to that because it's not. It's going to be a challenge to keep a 6-year-old entertained. So remember that we're not confined to the house. I would be taking your 6-year-old out for walks around the block on, a couple of times a day to help get rid of some of that pent-up energy. there you go. Hopefully that helps and gives you something to work with. Okay, and now we've got Sharon. Sharon, number 2. Sharon asked, is it best to try and stick with a broad school routine, like 2 snacks and a late lunch, or create our own for this period? It's a good question, Sharon, and really there's no one answer. It's one of those things where, one size doesn't really fit all. It depends on the child. I mean, I've been saying that routine's important. I've also been saying don't focus too much on academic work. But really it's because children are so different. There's going to be a vast spectrum of needs. Some kids really, really like routine and it's super important to them. Like I think through this time, routine is going to be quite important to all kids to keep stable. But some kids in their temperament type, their personality type, really, really like routine. I've had parents telling me over Facebook how their kids have gone, right, well, if we're doing school at home now, then, we need to do it this way. And I've got a bell that's going to ring at 9 o'clock and, they want to set up a school desk. That's not something I would immediately advise, but because the child has initiated it, that tells me that that's what they need. So then I would follow their initiation. I would let that child have that routine and that structure if that's what they need to calm them down. But if the kid's just neutral and in the middle, doesn't strongly suggest that themselves, then I would have a routine, but not necessarily try and copy a school routine. You're not their teacher, you're their parent, so just try and be their parent. Have a routine at home that works for you at home. The reason routines work is because they're predictable. So it doesn't have to be the school routine, it just needs to be a predictable routine. And so you decide based on your own child's temperament and personality, whether you need to, how much you need to copy school to make them feel safe, or whether you can just straight away go to a more, home-based, family-based routine. So yeah. Might sound like I'm skirting around the edges. I'm not trying to skirt around the edges of that question. It's just hard. I don't want people to think that there's just one answer that fits every kid. It is dependent on that kid's temperament and how important that stuff is to them. It's also hugely important about whether the kid initiated it. So the short answer is if the kid initiated school routines, then yeah, do it. If the kid doesn't initiate it, then no, I wouldn't do it. I'd have your own routine. Okay, powering through. If you've got questions, then, we're doing this live, so we've got people around so that your questions will get couriered over to me, and I'll get them on the iPad, so feel free to be putting in questions as you go. The more interactive it is, the easier it is for me too, so don't be shy. Jump in and ask some questions. So a number of you said, my children are spending more time than usual on their devices. Is this okay? Or what's your advice on an increased amount of screen time during lockdown? Yeah, it's a hard one, because I just feel for all the parents that are in the confines of a house and have to stay in their neighbourhood, and there is going to be a real tendency to just want to put the kids on the device. It's one of the things where the kids finally be quiet, they finally are off your case. But I would not be doing you a very good service if my job's supposed to be disseminating the research to you and saving you the time going and doing hours and hours of research yourself and saying, well, if you went and did that, here's what you would find. And if you went and did that, what you would be left with is a deep, deep concern for your child having too much screen time. It is a wee bit like a big social experiment because it's the first generation we've done that to, but there is a correlation between the amount of screen time they have and their chances of having anxiety and depression later on. There's a clear link in the literature. So I don't want to make parents feel guilty. You've got enough on your plate right now dealing with everything else, but I just want to be honest with you that screen time is something to be concerned about. So I think maybe the way to navigate through that is to have really clear no device times while we're in lockdown, so that if the kids are having screens, that I've talked about in other places about there's a real clear division in the literature between children that have exposure to devices on and off all day and children that have exposure to devices on and off all day but also have a 2-hour window where they're not allowed a device. Where mum and dad have said, right, between 5 and 7, there's no devices. That's when we're cooking tea, peeling the potatoes, getting the table set. And that's when we communicate as a family. So no devices between 5 and 7. If that becomes part of your routine, they'll probably resist for a start. But if it becomes part of your routine and you stick to it, the kids will quickly get used to that. And that does, from a research-based point of view, take them outside the group of children who are at risk of having anxiety and depression as a result of screen time, because they just have 2 hours device-free time a day. Remember, that's within the normal rhythm of being on and off them. It doesn't mean that the kids can be on a device for 22 hours and then just have 2 hours device free. It means that there's 2 hours where there's no devices. So that's when you do your physical activity, when you do your jobs and your chores. But that's maybe a way to navigate through this time. Your kids just develop resilience if they have that 2 hours free time. It's also very dependent on age. The World Health Organization and the World Association of Pediatrics say that the appropriate number of minutes per day that a child can be looking at a screen without doing some damage is 0, meaning that because their vision is developing, it's not hugely detrimental. It's not going to make the kid go blind. It's just saying that it's not positive for their brains. Children need real life face-to-face interactions in the first 2 years. So as far as screens go, we could say in the first 2 years, children shouldn't really look at a screen at all. It's not good for them. It's not going to do them any benefit whatsoever. And then after that, as parents, we and you have to moderate how much that is. And you decide that for yourself. But there you go. Now you've got the research at least to back you up. The kids need to have a 2-hour device time. That advice is really handy if your kids don't yet have devices, because, if they're like 9 and you haven't given them a cell phone yet, because now you can give it to them and right from the start say, oh, yeah, but between 5 and 7, you hand it in, we plug it in to get charged, and they just know right from the start. If you're now trying to pry your devices off your child for 2 hours a day and they're surgically attached, then yeah, good luck with that, because that's going to be a whole lot more difficult. Okay, on to the next one. Rebecca. Rebecca said, I have an 8-year-old who wants to be right by my side way more than normal, and a teething 10-month-old. Struggling to juggle entertaining and teaching my daughter while caring for my baby. My big girl is suddenly jealous of the baby and I feel hung on all day long. Any advice? Whoa, yeah, well, that's a big one, because, I'm at home with my youngest daughter, but she's 21. I do really have empathy for those parents that are in exactly this situation. It is a big ask. I think one of the things that you can do, Rebecca, of course that she wants to be right by your side way more than usual. It is normal when things get a bit shaky and kids get a bit scared that they regress a wee bit and they cling to their loved ones. And you don't have to worry about them being soft. Actually, the more available the parent is to the child when they do that and just let them have a hug, actually the more resilient the child will be. So it's fine that she wants a wee bit more attention. I know it's demanding for you, but I'm just saying it doesn't represent anything to worry about for her, because it's a normal behaviour and all you've got to do is make yourself available. With siblings like this, there's a real trap that we can fall into as parents where we've got an older child and we really want to do the best for them and we've given them all of this attention, and we can be a bit worried when the baby comes that the older one's going to get jealous. And so sometimes what we do is when the baby is down to sleep, then we get in and we give lots of full-on one-on-one time to our firstborn child, and to try and make up and give them some of that one-on-one time. Now, that's done with the best of intentions, but if you look at that from your eldest child's point of view, what that means for them is their experience of the world is that life is way, way better when the baby's away. Because when they're getting all this attention is when the baby's in bed asleep. So for them, life's much better when the baby's not around. That sets them up for sibling rivalry and not to like the baby. It also sets you up to go kind of mental and crazy, and because you're not looking after yourself well in that equation, because when the baby's in bed, really you should be resting, because you've got a 10-month-old baby, and that's an exhausting job in itself. So what I would do is do it the other way around. I would set it up where baby 10-month-old has sort of had their needs met as much as you can, as in their nappy's changed and they've had their bottle and they're not due for anything else, so they should be content for the next 20 minutes or so. And then with content baby in your lap, then I would devote your full attention to your older child and do the tasks that they want to do, but with your baby there, trying to make the elder child the centre of that interaction, but really devote yourself to playing with them for a solid 20 minutes with the baby in your arms. I think you'll see what I'm getting at, is what that sets up for your elder child is, I get all this attention and life is a whole lot better when that baby's around. And when you add to that, because when the baby goes to sleep, like I said, you're going to go, okay, mum needs a rest now, so I'm going to have a snooze on the couch. You played with the blocks by yourself. So now you're really boring when the baby's not around, and you're really fun when the baby is up and around. And that sets the child up, sets up a less sibling rivalry, sets the child up to really like having the baby around. And like I say, it makes it easier for you, because then you are giving your child timers to both of them in an intense time. And when baby's down having a sleep, you might be able to get some other work done or get some much needed and earned downtime and rest time for yourself. Okay, do I answer everything I want to there? Yeah, I think so. Okay, number 5. Many parents also asked, oh yeah, we've got lots of feedback on this. How do we explain the virus in a way that's informative without making my children worried? Especially for parents who are essential workers and still have to go about leaving home for work. So yeah, I think the way that we talk about it to children, it's that thing of recognizing that children mainly live in their emotional brain. So the world is mainly emotional experience for them. As adults, we live more in this brain number 4, the frontal cortex. So the world's still emotional for us. We still have an emotional brain, but we have this logical brain that puts logic over top of all that emotions. And the logical brain, brain number 4, helps to calm brain number 3 and calm those emotions. Whereas children, that brain number 4 is not sort of fully developed until somewhere between 18 and 32. It's dependent on so many different factors. But what that means is childhood is a very emotional experience. The same thing happens to an adult if they get stressed about anything, because stress sends you back down the brain. So, you sort of lose a bit of your logic and understanding of consequences, and when your emotions are heightened. So yeah, I mean, what it means in plain language is we revert back to being children as soon as we are upset. But when you're a child, you stay being a child, and being a child is basically an emotional experience because you're in that brain number 3. So yeah, to explain this to them, you have to recognize that emotion, and first of all, just start off with acknowledging that emotion. Basically, you want to be able to give the kids some good advice. If you want the kids to listen to you, then you've got to, kids do as you do, not as you say. So if you want the kids to listen to you, you've got to show actively that you're listening to them. And most of their worldview is emotional, so make sure you speak back to that emotion first. So I might say something like, yeah, it is a bit scary, it is a bit weird. It does feel a wee bit like a science fiction movie when I'm lining up to go into the supermarket with, 2 meters apart. It does feel strange and new, doesn't it? Because you acknowledge that what they're feeling is normal. And then the way to talk about it to children is to model resilience, is to talk about the action that we're taking that is positive. So you don't leave with a panic. Oh, it's all very new and I don't understand it and I don't know what's going to happen. That can be terrifying for children. So going, yes, it is all very new and we don't sort of know what to expect. But I'm really confident that we're handling it so well as a country. We're sort of, world leaders. Lots of other countries are looking to what we're doing, to see what to do. So, and I know that everyone started washing their hands and, you focus on the action that you can take. So acknowledge any fear or emotion and then end with acknowledging something that you can do. That's a proactive thing that you can do. So much of how the children are going to respond is based on your reaction. Starts out as a little baby when we call it social referencing, that you can see the little child. If they fall over and they wait a second before they look to see what your reaction is, whether they need to cry or not. And if you're just like looking at them and remain neutral, they often just dust themselves off. If you go, oh, then they burst into tears. That social referencing, that happens throughout their life. So what it means is that they're going on how you're going. If they see you watching the media constantly and freaking out about the coronavirus, then they start to freak out about the coronavirus. If they hear you talking about it and just talking about it without talking about action that we're taking and without putting that positive lens on it, then that can help the children to panic. So yeah, that's the way to talk to them about it. Acknowledge their emotions, but be very proactive about showing the action that we're taking. For the essential workers who are going out, you don't want to emphasise the danger of it because you don't need the children obviously having that added level of anxiety of worrying that their parents are in danger. So for the people in my family, when we've talked about essential workers to young children, we've talked about them being highly trusted people. That because we've got, this is the way we're responding to this national disaster, we have to have the really highly trusted people and out there working, and they're our essential workers. So that your children are proud of the fact that they are our trusted members of society that are out there working and taking on that risk. But you just don't want to emphasise the risk aspect because children will panic. So I'd emphasise the trusted people of society, the essential workers aspect. Mm-hmm. Also, referred to what we say before, what I said before, for essential workers, you want to make sure that you set aside time for that child as well. But I think that's going to come up in this next question, maybe. So look, question 6, Cheyenne. She said, we have a nearly 3-year-old that has been dealing with a lot of changes lately. Moving house, having a newborn baby sister, and now being on lockdown. He's acting out by hitting, biting, and throwing things. Well, he's 3. That's kind of the way they do it. We know this is the way he is dealing with his emotions. We would just love some tips on how to react when this happens. Yeah, he's at that age where he's not really got that frontal cortex, that brain number 4 that understands consequences and controls emotions. It's only really just, it's giving him language. He's probably got in a language burst right now and learning more stuff all the time. But emotional control, that's a fair way down the pathway. So throwing things, biting, it's usually just a way of showing that I'm being overwhelmed by my emotions, that I'm frustrated. So there's several things you can do. One is just like I've just said before, is recognizing that emotion. That what you need to do is first name that emotion. You might come back at them with, oh, are you feeling angry, buddy? Oh, are you feeling frustrated, buddy? Oh, did that make you sad? I mean, you know your child and you know what level they will understand, what words they're going to understand that will work for them. But the point is you're trying to get them to see that you can see their emotion, that you hear their emotion. It's not their words so much they need you to hear at that age, but their emotion. So acknowledge back that emotion first. I think my first instinct really when I read this was if I was the parent, I think when they're nearly 3, I think I would just plop down to their level, actually sit down on the ground, open my arms up and spread them to the child and just be a safe haven for them to, at that age, often all they want to do is to rush into your arms because they're feeling overwhelmed and they just want you to wrap your arms around them. And it can be as simple as that. I don't think you need to absolutely at all worry about any punitive stuff around having to punish away these behaviours. If anything, you want to name the behaviours that he can do. So don't say don't bite. Say, here you go, mate, bite on this. When he's, biting on something and he bites a sibling or he bites you, and just try to avoid that don't bite and instead go, here you go, buddy, you're allowed to bite on this. I mean, for all we know, he's got some teething stuff going on and he actually has a physical sensation and needs to bite down. That's why in the old days, parents used to give you 2 wooden pegs, ram together, wood's sort of nice and flexible. Plastic doesn't do it quite as well because plastic doesn't have that same flexibility, but it helps with teething. But the point is, rather than say what not to do, try and redirect them into what to do. So that might be you just plonking down and opening up your arms and being a safe haven, or it might be you naming back the emotion. You can try giving him strategies, but I think it's 90% about naming the emotion and only 10% about giving him the strategies. Because sometimes he's trying to problem solve. If he's overwhelmed because someone won't give him the toy, then you might give a strategy of going, oh, say please, try and say please, say, can I please have the toy? That's a strategy. It gets frustrating for children when parents go straight to strategies and don't acknowledge the emotion first. So the strategy can be a wee bit helpful, but 90% of it is going, oh, did that upset you, buddy? Did that hurt your feelings, buddy? Do you need a cuddle? That's going to make them resilient and strong. There we go. Yeah. It's a difficult age, 2 to 3. That's why it's famous, throughout history as the tantruming 2s. And it's often for little boys, because they develop a little bit slower than girls usually. It's often the tantruming 3s. But children just go through the stage where they're incredibly overwhelmed by their emotions. And so what we want to do really is to teach them strategies for dealing with their emotions. And what's helpful for you when you're overwhelmed by your emotions? It's probably not someone saying, oh, don't be silly, and completely invalidating your emotions. Sometimes it's just someone just standing with you while you're in the emotion. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to solve it. You just stand with them while it washes over them. The point is your child's emotional intelligence, this is where it's going to start to develop. This is the skills he's going to use as a teenager to sort of, navigate those choppy seas. So I wouldn't go into punitive stuff or making the child feel like they're naughty in any way at this age, because they're not. They're just overwhelmed. Yeah, what I'm saying is I wish there was some nice easy strategy I could just give you that went bang and fixed that, but then they wouldn't be famous for the last 100 years of being tantruming 2s. It is overwhelming. I think the best thing you can do is actually just sit down and make yourself available. And when they go, no, and they don't want you, then just go, okay, that's fine, you don't have to, but I'm just going to sit here and wait for you if you need dad or if you need mum. If you can possibly do that, I think that's the best response to give them. Just help them learn to name those emotions. Okay. Where did we go with Cheyenne? Now Elizabeth. How do you explain to a 6 and a 3-year-old they could not go visit their grandparents for at least 4 weeks? Yeah, well, good luck. I don't know how you're going to explain that to a 3-year-old. I think you're just going to have to keep using positive messages. I mean, one of the things I'd say is if you possibly can, set them up on Skype so that they can see their grandparents. Not just a Skype call, I'd actually arrange like morning tea and stuff, go the full hog. It'll feel much more like a family ritual if they're going to be having a cup of tea at the same time and they've got their camera set up. And so you set up to have a cup of tea at the same time. So you make a deal of having morning tea. Or, some ritual. So it's more than just get on the phone and say hello to Nana, because that can feel a bit awkward. Whereas if everyone's doing it at the same time and everyone's actually making a cup of tea or doing some type of ritual like that, that gives you something to do, something to joke about, that small talk that all releases all the positive endorphins and peptides and stuff in your brain, and it's going to make the kids feel like they're still in relationship with those people. I thought that for one of the earlier questions too, when people said that they were at home with just one child. I think that's going to be something important to do, is to let them have contact with their friends via Skype and Zoom and all those other sorts of, social media platforms. We're saying limit screen time, but I would say the sort of screen time that is going to be quite good for them is interacting with their friends. It is going to be really important to have, interaction with other people to keep the kids happy and connected, and same as it is for the rest of us. Okay, we'll still have another 10, 15 minutes, haven't we? Yeah. Now, just can I add advice to that? To explain to a 6 and a 3-year-old how they're not going to visit their grandparents for at least 4 weeks. I suppose I would also be giving the message about how you're doing this to be, it's a positive thing. It's to look after their grandparents. It's what we're doing to help and to keep them safe, and again, acknowledge their emotions. Oh, we miss them too. Yeah, it is really difficult. It's really important that we keep in touch with Nana and Granddad. So that's why we're going to have a virtual morning tea tomorrow and give them something to look forward to in a ritual. And maybe then they'll focus on that rather than the why. If you give them something positive they can do, get them to help in setting up a morning tea online with the grandparents. I'm assuming that the grandparents can do that, but maybe if all they've got to do is aim the phone and you can talk them through it, good luck. Oh, yeah, okay, this one. A few parents asked, what advice do you have for parents of older children, who, despite explaining the risks, are not taking the lockdown seriously and want to see their girlfriend, boyfriend, for example? Yeah, this is a really difficult one. That teenagers are famous for a challenging authority. That's what they've done for thousands of years throughout millennia. There's hieroglyphics on the side of the pyramids that talk about teenagers, making the parents pull their hair out because they don't listen to their elders and they break all the rules. So it's not something they're doing just to you as their parents. It is something that's programmed into their biology, and they've been doing for thousands of years. But obviously it can't be tolerated, it's not going to be able to happen in this environment. So I'm starting with empathy, because I think that's probably the best place to start with those kids, is with empathy. Saying, yeah, I know this is really difficult, it's really hard. They are at an age where they're biologically being programmed to differentiate with their parents and to more attach to their peers and their social network. And then they're at an age where when they fall in love, when anyone falls in love, it's an amazing experience to the brain, obviously. There's masses of serotonin and dopamine and peptides galore. But when you're a teenager, that frontal cortex hasn't yet developed, so the emotion can seem even stronger. It's hard to put into a short time frame, but basically part of what's happening in the adolescent brain is the brain that controls your emotions, brain number 4, that controls your emotions, sees things from other people's point of view, makes you reasonable. That basically gets shut for renovations for about 3 years. Not 100% of the time, but it's shut for renovations 90% of the time. So it is more difficult for teenagers to regulate their emotions, to understand consequences. If that didn't make it difficult enough, adolescence is also, you've basically had a turbocharger added to your emotional brain. So teenagers, as well as shutting down the brakes, they've also had a turbocharger added to the accelerator. So when we're thinking about emotions in their brain. So it is really difficult for them to stay away. When they fall in love, they think they're more in love than anyone's ever been in the history of mankind. So I suppose I would appeal to that emotional brain. There's no point just talking about all the laws and the fines and what's going to happen, and because that's not really making them feel listened to, I think. So with their sneaking out to see girlfriends, I think you're going to have to play up the romance part of it, the Romeo and Juliet. Well, maybe not Romeo and Juliet, but didn't have a good ending that one. But play up the romance of it, that if you really love someone, they'll be there at the other side. This could make your relationship stronger. This will challenge you to have to learn to really, really communicate, because you can't just fall to touch or just fall to saying the same thing. Now, if the relationship's really worth its salt, then it will easily get through this 4-week period. So again, it's not too dissimilar as it is with the 2-year-olds, really. Is you need to acknowledge the emotion. The brain of a 2-year-old and a 16-year-old are not really that different, as in all of the activity is happening in the emotional areas of the brain, and there is bugger all lights on in the emotional control areas of the brain. So even though they're two completely different developmental stages, not that different. So your response doesn't have to be that different. Obviously, you're doing it in a different language to a 2-year-old than a 15-year-old, but the order's the same. Acknowledge the emotions, calm the emotions, and then speak, and then, give them a strategy. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Is that enough advice? I'm thinking, because that's a big question, really, isn't it, for older kids that are ignoring lockdown? I think you've just got to, like I say, acknowledge the emotions, outline what the consequences will be, and then they're just going to have to deal with the consequences. Okay, moving on to a question maybe we can answer. Helen. Okay, kia ora, Helen. Helen said, "Hi, Nathan. I'm a mum of an only child, a 3-year-old. I've always been really proactive with play dates and surrounding him with lots of kids because he's an only. When life returns to normal, I worry that he will find it difficult to be back around other kids on play dates, daycare, especially as we often see the neighbours' kids out and about, and now have to keep him away physically. Any tips for adjustment period when this is over?" Okay, good question, Helen. Good that you're thinking that far ahead, that you're thinking about when it's over. The first thing I'd say is not to worry too much. His social skills, his attitude towards other people, most of that's established in the first 1,000 days of life, and that first 1,000 days ends at about 2.5. So, I see absolutely where you're coming from, but actually the foundations for those are well established already, and 4 weeks is not going to change that drastically. 4 weeks is just going to be a little surface habit. So I think you might find that when the lockdown is over and he's able to meet up with other kids again, that for a while maybe you do need to stay a little bit closer and scaffold that a little bit more for him than usual. But it'll just be for a couple of play dates until he clicks back into what has really been most of his reality, the first 1,000 days of his life, not just these last 4 weeks. But just like we mentioned earlier, I would do things to keep encouraging his social skills, because it must be difficult to look at the other kids in the neighbourhood, hear siblings playing with each other, and only be able to look at that out the window. That's always been difficult for children for generations, but they haven't normally been in quarantine and had 4 weeks of having to see it. So I would find out who are his close friends, people that he wants to stay in regular contact with, and set up, like I said before, about morning teas and play dates and all that stuff virtually online, so that you still encourage those social skills. Mm-hmm. Reach out and use any members of because I know you say you haven't got family in the local area, but wouldn't so much matter if they were in the local area, because we're all in our little bubbles now. So family that have offered to help and are saying on social media anything they can do to help, that if people could set up some regular sort of talks with him and be ringing him and interacting, that would be helpful. That's a way that people can contribute. Mm-hmm. Okay. I know a lot of people are going to watch this afterwards, and I'm not necessarily on the live feed, but let me just check if you got. Yeah. I just want to know: have you got any other questions? Have you continue to feed them all through here, or is there other ones?
Just going to do it through your phone.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, I was supposed to check that. Yeah, no, I got that one. Yeah, no, we got that one. You're good. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I think we covered the questions and the ones that come through. I think that's what we covered there at the end. Yeah. You can continue to send your questions, because we'll do other Facebook posts where we answer any other issues that come up. This general advice we've been posting, since we've been in lockdown, it's really that, like we said at the start, that you are sort of the emotional barometer for your child. So just make sure that as well as all these things that you're doing to look after your child, you're also looking after yourself, and you give yourself some space within the day. For the people that are at home with 3 kids, that might just be a bath for 10 minutes. It might be setting the kids up with something that they really like, where you know they're going to be entertained for 10 minutes, and just taking 10 minutes to have a cup of coffee in a special place by yourself, uninterrupted for 10 minutes. But you've got to do something to nurture and feed yourself.
One question.
Oh, okay. Another question come through.
Any advice for parents with children with additional needs or disabilities?
Okay, so any advice for parents where the kids have different, special needs or disabilities? I think just that you've got to have even more on your plate. I see all children as being like layered cakes, if you like. Nobody is straightforward. Everyone's a combination of their genes and the early environment they experienced and where they are in the family. And, everyone's already a layered cake. But when you have a special need like autism, any sort of special need, ADHD, Down syndrome, any different need is simply another layer on top of that cake. So you've got to meet the needs of those children on top of it. All I would say is that the more special needs you've got, the more routine is important. The more predictability is important. The more individual your brain is, the more it's likely to be arousing the stress response system. And so the predictability and routine is really wonderful for calming that down and helping. Yeah, I mean, I'm saying that for everybody, but if your child's got special needs, even more so for that child.
Okay, one from April. Your son has now attached himself to his comfort toy, which normally never comes out of the bedroom, but is now attached to his hand.
Right.
Worry how to reverse it when life goes back to normal.
Okay, so he's taken his comfort toy and he now doesn't want to let it go. And so that April is asking how can, when we go back to normal life, if there is such a thing, how do we get that back from again? So what I would say is let him have the comfort toy. It's just a very clever strategy on your child's part for knowing how to self-calm. That they've grabbed something that they know they associate with comfort and belonging and well-being. So it tells me a very intelligent child that's already showing some skills in knowing how to self-calm. So when this is over, I would just encourage him to have longer and longer periods of time without it, without traumatizing it, without taking it away. It's just really a little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy. It doesn't have to be a big deal at the end. It's just having it away for longer and longer periods. I know when my daughter was, she'd have her cuddly to go to sleep, and it just meant that when I took that away when she was asleep, she knew that was going to happen. It wasn't a surprise to her. And that meant that when she woke up, there was the option of whether she decided to ask for it or not. And if she did, then we'd give it to her again straight away. So it's just slowly weaned away like that. I don't think you need to be concerned about it. I think, like I say, I think your child's just got some really good skills on knowing how to calm themselves.
One from Lavina.
Lavina?
Yep, Lavina's got a 10-year-old child who was already reluctant to go to school before the lockdown started.
Right.
Now been home with this extended period. How would you go about helping them adjust to returning back to school post-lockdown?
Okay, so I got a child that was reluctant to go to school anyway, and now they're going to be at home for all these weeks. So advice on how to get them back into going to school. Yeah, it's going to be difficult if they didn't like to go to school anyway, because that's such a complex issue. Is that sometimes we just assume that the fault's with the child, and sometimes the fault's with the school. Maybe that place is not a good, or maybe it's just a mismatch that person's temperament doesn't fit well with that teacher or with that classroom. But yeah, assuming that is all good and it's just about getting him integrated back into a classroom he likes being, then I would emphasize the fact that it's a shared experience. I talk about when school goes back that it's going to be much easier to do it now when everybody else is doing it. So, and that I would emphasize you need to be there to help support your friends as well, because if you're finding this difficult, lots of people are going to find it difficult. So I think it's important after the 4 weeks that, I wonder if after the 4 weeks he might not be hankering to get to school, because as he had, 4 solid weeks locked up, he might be hopefully desperate to see mates by then.
Okay, one last one from Tammy.
Okay.
Tammy asks, how can we as early childhood teachers best support families throughout the lockdown?
Oh, that's a good question, Tammy. How can we as early childhood teachers best support the family during the lockdown? I think what a lot of the families are going to be feeling is that pressure to entertain their children all the time. So, one of the things that I've been trying to do but running out of time doing is trying to help those parents with resources and websites and games and things that are going to entertain the children. I think that teachers probably have a few more of those up the sleeve anyway than parents do. So I think that's a way that you can directly help the family. But by sending that stuff out, it may be doing what early childhood teachers spend a lot of their time doing, which is that parent education stuff, or because by teaching the parents how to self-calm, then they know they're going to help the children to self-calm as well. So I think send them out ideas on how to help entertain the kids, any good ideas you can find, good websites and stuff, and then use that point of contact as a way just to be a soundboard and support them emotionally. Because I think early childhood teachers do that really well anyway. So off the top of my head, that's a good question. I might give that one more thought and post something on it later, actually, just what can if early childhood teachers are trapped at home. But that's the first one that comes into my head. That's the one I hear most that parents need the help with, is creative things that we can be doing with our child that are easy to set up at home, but can keep the child entertained for a long period of time. So early childhood teachers to the fore.
So we've got from Jenny. Any advice regarding siblings that aren't used to spending so much time together that could help them get on?
Oh, okay. So Jenny wants advice on siblings that don't usually spend much time together, and now they're in the house on lockdown. Things that you can do to help them to get along. Yeah, this is a big topic in my house. Yeah, if you have, my two youngest siblings fought a lot. My two youngest children. So it was very validating to me to look at the literature and find out that the most aggression you get between siblings is a 2-year age gap, because my kids had exactly a two-year age gap. So apparently if you have 18 months or less, they act more like twins, and so there is some conflict, but not that much. If there's a 2.5 or a 3-year age gap or more, then there's such a developmental gap between the two kids that they've got clearly defined roles. So they don't tend to fight as much. One's the older brother and one's the younger, or sister. Where you get the most aggression is when there's a 2-year age gap, because that's not close enough to operate like twins, but not far enough apart to have clearly different developmental roles. 2 years is just the perfect gap to be in constant competition over everything. So the only way you can have more aggression between siblings in a 2-year age gap is if they are the opposite gender. So a 2-year age gap, boy and girl, that's kind of in the literature a recipe for having aggression. So how do you fix that? I think that some of that might be putting the responsibility on them to maybe contribute a lot, if not fix that themselves. What do they need? I know with my children, what it needed a whole lot of nutting out and often coming up with agreements that they could both agree on. That, okay, well, I'm going to do this, and in return for that, you'll do this. And, sometimes I had to jump in as the parent and, basically try and stop some behaviours that were leading to eruptions all of the time. But yeah, okay, and I wish there was some wonderful piece of advice I could give you that says you just do this and bang, it seems to fix it wonderfully. But the only thing I found that worked was if they come up with their own solutions. So give them rewards and incentives for why they have to come up with solutions for how they're going to successfully live together, over the next 4 weeks. Yeah, that's what I would do. I would put the responsibility back onto them. And the strategies that I would think of is if it becomes too much, then I remember at one stage, this was the last case scenario, but we divided up the house, into, right, okay, you can have my bedroom with the Sky TV in there, and you can have the lounge out there, and then you're just going to switch over at these times, and when one person's in the kitchen, the other person doesn't go into the kitchen until they're finished, and so that you have a day of actual space away from each other. So you might be in the same house this was just over normal school holidays, not in lockdown, but that way if they were getting in each other's faces too much, then a day where they actually were physically separated from each other can be helpful as well. That's not a really good long-term strategy, because they are going to have to learn to get on with each other at some point. But under heightened pressure times like the lockdown, then it's also a viable strategy as well.
Okay, we've got one from Kelly. Kelly says, how would you suggest working with a 10-year-old child who seems fine during the day but becomes tearful and anxious at bedtime and needs parents to stay in the room to go to sleep?
Okay, did you say 10 years old?
10 years old.
So how would I deal with a 10-year-old that seems fine during the day but at night times becomes anxious and wants parents to stay in the room for them to go to sleep? I know it may seem counterintuitive, but actually what the research tells us is different from what your mother-in-law tells you. The research says the more you cater to those children, the more resilient they end up being. So the parents are like, well, that's all right, honey. It's okay to be scared. Look, I'll just lie down here with you where you go to sleep. And you lie there and stroke their hair until they go to sleep. Turns out that doesn't make them a wuss. That makes them a resilient adult. That makes them someone who learns to deal with their emotions and come through on the other side of it because you supported them. So they get used to being resilient. They develop an expectation that they will be able to deal with the emotion. And the opposite is you going, oh, don't be so really ridiculous, and making them do it and getting them crying and getting them upset. And they actually just learn to be really traumatized when they have an emotion, and that it ends out being a emotional blow up. So I would say in difficult times like this, I would maybe just stay there in the room with her. I mean, I'm a bit soft like that. If they're during times of turmoil, I just follow what the research tells me, which is you can't really overindulge and spoil them at that stage. If they need to sleep in your bed, then you let them sleep in your bed. If they need to drag their bed into your room, or they need you to lie with them until they go to sleep. But yeah, I think I would just lie with them until they go to sleep, or compromise. Say, okay, maybe I'll lie with you for 5 minutes and then we'll keep the door open, or you put on a night light. But I would focus more on just making the child feel safe. You want this to be easy, not difficult. So if they need a night light or they need you to lie with them for 10 minutes, I'll do that. I've never seen any literature anywhere in any research that ever suggests that would ever be harmful. So I think err on the side of being more like a grandparent. Grandparents normally err on the side of being quite soft and nurturing and spoiling a little bit. And yeah, I think that's more the way to go.
Okay, we got one from Karen. It says, any advice for ACE teachers who really want to help?
Any advice for ACE teachers?
ECE.
ECE, right, yeah, I was going to say, yeah, ACE. ACE is another whole thing. That's adverse childhood experiences. It's a whole research thing. Okay, so any just general advice for ECE teachers? Any general advice for ECE teachers? Because we've got that question about them helping the parents at home, or is this just a general question about...
one for them, yeah. So they really want to help. How can they?
Okay, right. So ECE teachers, well, we sort of answered that before, saying if they're with the parents, give them ideas on what to do to entertain the kids. Give them ideas on self-calming things. Give them reassurance that the kids don't need to be doing academic stuff. I think what's a lot of the anxiety for parents is they're thinking, oh, I've got to be my kid's teacher now, and I've got to teach them the alphabet and shit. The parents could do a lot of damage if they're getting these early childhood kids and deciding, right, well, we'll just use this experience to get you ready for school and get you reading. So I think what you can do to be helpful, as well as what I said before about suggesting activities and creative things and games they can play. Another way of being helpful is to reassure the parents that they don't need to do that. Reassure the parents that you've got a social emotional curriculum. And so it's all about, in simple language, that means it's all about how the child feels as a learner when you're under the age of 8. It doesn't matter so much how much of the alphabet they can do, how much they can count up to, how many colours they know. Those cognitive skills plateau by the age of 8 usually. So what that means is that if the kid knows their alphabet at 3 and the kid that doesn't learn their alphabet till 7, by the time they're 8, we can't tell the difference. Those cognitive skills under 8, they all tend to catch up and be at around the same level at 8. So it doesn't, reassure them that they don't need to focus on that. And I think that'll take a lot of the stress away from them, that they need to focus on the kids feeling good as learners. So enjoying learning. Yeah. I think I'm going to think about that when I probably do an individual post on that, because there'll be a lot of early childhood teachers. They're isolated. They want to know how they can help. But yeah, it probably needs more depth of thinking. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is a general question regarding early childhood education during the lockdown. But I think
pretty much. There, that's what that one there is. The early childhood education during the lockdown is about. Think about primary school as for thinking. Early childhood is for feeling. So what's really, really going to matter under the age of 7 is how your child feels as a learner, not what they're doing. So under 7, I'd really focus on child-directed play. Just trust your child's play, let them initiate the play, trust that whatever they initiate isn't a coincidence, it is exactly what they need to do. And then you're there as the adult to scaffold that play, not to take over as a teacher, not to decide that you know what they need to learn, You don't interfere in the play process like that, but you're there to scaffold it, to let them stay in charge. Your child's the leader of the learning, and you do what you can to add to that learning and to make it easier for them, and handing them resources, and really think of yourself as the support person to your child's learning when they're under the age of 8. And really try, the challenge for you is to not be in charge at all. Because that's very culturally bound for us to sort of think that the teacher, the person in charge, has got, and the learner is the empty vessel that you need to fill up with all of your knowledge. But that might be sort of akin to what a primary and a secondary school teacher in some ways is doing. But under 7, that's really definitely not what the research tells you you're supposed to be doing. You're not filling up an empty vessel. We don't start filling up the vessel with factual stuff and information and stuff until they're 7. We've got to build up brains 1, 2, and 3 before that. So early childhood is about building up those brains 1, 2, and 3. And that's about your emotional brain. That's about what we call dispositions that you bring to learning, like, curiosity, exploration, perseverance. So when you're building a sandcastle and you persevere for an hour, that's how you learn perseverance in early childhood, not because someone told you you've got to sit down and write T's for an hour. That'll teach you to hate learning and be disengaged. So yeah, the simple way of saying that is focus on feeling rather than thinking when we're thinking about early childhood in general.
And the last question was similar to what you had with the children not going to see grandparents, that are saying when they have a single parent home and are unable to have their usual visits with their mother or the father that they don't live with.
Right, yeah.
What's the best way to explain that to the children?
Okay, yeah, so we've got mum and dad are living in separate homes, and now the child is used to seeing both parents and now is going to be in lockdown with just one parent. How do we deal with that with the child? I think obviously you're going to have regular contact, but I think it's about making that contact routine so that you still do the good night story. So that they ring, mum or dad, whoever the parent is that they're not with, on not just a regular basis, but a ritualized basis. So it becomes part of their daily ritual that they do that, 2 times a day. And I'm explaining it to them is going to be the same as it is for everybody else. It's validating that emotion, but emphasizing the reason that we're doing this. We're doing this to keep everybody safe. This is the right thing to do, and we should be proud that we're doing the right thing. But yeah, it is quite hard. And, that's really just what we've got to do for everybody. Okay, I want to thank you people for signing in and sending in your questions. I know this is a whole new format, and we're also getting used to this new normal. But I hope within that there's some advice, and you've got a format to be able to have your questions answered. So we'll probably do some more of these. So thanks for your support, everybody, and we'll see you in the very near future. And quick shout out to NIB and all the team there for your support. Kia ora.